guard charges them with his horse. Watch what happens. The sun hung low, sending warm golden light across the cobblestones, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the nearby trees. Birds chirped softly, and the distant sound of a bell from a small church tower marked the passage of time. Life seemed ordinary, almost peaceful. People moved about their day, some selling fruits and vegetables at the stalls, others carrying baskets filled with goods from the market. Children ran around, laughing and playing, while shopkeepers occasionally called out to attract customers. Among the ordinary crowd, a small group of young men loitered near the gate, their expressions restless and mischievous. They weren't causing trouble yet, but their body language suggested they were looking for an opportunity to stir some excitement. One of them leaned against the wall, tossing a small stone from hand to hand, while another whispered something and laughed quietly. The crowd around them mostly ignored them, too caught up in their own activities to notice the tension that was slowly building. Not far from the group, a guard sat atop a tall, strong horse. His uniform was neat, his boots polished, and the sunlight reflected off the metal of his belt and buttons. He looked calm and collected, but his eyes were sharp, constantly scanning the crowd. He had been a guard for many years and had seen all kinds of situations, from peaceful festivals to sudden disturbances. Today, even though everything seemed calm on the surface, he felt a faint unease. Something in the air told him that trouble might be near. The guard's horse, a majestic creature with a sleek brown coat and dark, intelligent eyes, shifted its weight as if sensing the same tension. The horse's ears twitched, and it snorted softly. The guard patted its neck, whispering a few reassuring words. He trusted the horse completely, knowing that in critical moments, their bond could make all the difference. He had trained with this horse for years, and together, they had faced situations that required quick thinking and courage. As the crowd went about their day, the small group of young men began edging closer to the gate itself. One of them, bolder than the others, started pushing against the side of the gate gently at first, testing it. The guard's sharp eyes noticed the movement immediately. He tightened his grip on the reins and focused his attention on them. He knew that ignoring even a small act of defiance could encourage bigger trouble. The man pushing the gate laughed softly, and the others joined in. They began to move in closer to the center of the gate, shoving a little, trying to see if anyone would stop them. Their actions were not violent yet, but the guard could sense that their energy was not harmless. The people around them started to notice the tension as well. Some stepped back, giving the group space, while others frowned, unsure if they should intervene. The guard called out to them in a firm, steady voice. "Please, step away from the gate. This area is not for playing or causing trouble." His tone was calm but carried authority, the kind that made people instinctively pay attention. The young men looked up, smirking, and one of them replied with a casual laugh. "We're just having some fun," he said. "No harm done." The guard remained silent for a moment, letting his gaze move slowly across each of them. He wasn't angry, but he was preparing for the possibility that they might not obey. His experience told him that words alone sometimes were not enough to stop a determined few. He adjusted his position on the horse, sitting taller, ready to act if necessary. The horse seemed to sense the change in its rider's demeanor and stood more firmly, muscles tense and ready to move at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, the small crowd around the gate started whispering among themselves. Some people shook their heads, warning the group quietly to behave, while others just watched with curiosity. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a quiet electricity that made the peaceful afternoon feel suddenly fragile. Everyone seemed to be waiting, holding their breath, for what might happen next. The young men, feeling the attention from both the guard and the crowd, paused for a moment. One of them tilted his head and whispered something to the others. They laughed quietly again, thinking it was amusing that the guard seemed so serious. But the guard did not look angry or impatient. He remained calm, his eyes steady, his posture composed. There was something in his presence that made people pay attention without him needing to shout or act aggressively. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the faint sound of the city beyond the gate, the clatter of carts on stone roads, the distant ringing of another bell, and the murmur of voices from people walking nearby. The guard felt the moment stretching, aware that things could change in an instant. His training reminded him to stay vigilant, to be ready for any sudden movements. He could not allow the situation to escalate, not when there were so many people around who could be caught in trouble. The young men, perhaps sensing the seriousness of the guard's demeanor, stepped back slightly, but it was clear they were not entirely done. Their laughter was quieter now, more nervous, yet their eyes still held mischief. One of them glanced at the horse, noticing its size and strength. For a brief moment, he seemed to reconsider, but the group's momentum kept them moving closer again, testing the limits of the guard's patience. The guard continued to watch, his mind calculating the best way to prevent the situation from escalating. He had a choice: try to talk to them more, risking that they might ignore him, or act decisively to assert control. He knew that in situations like this, hesitation could lead to chaos. The crowd, sensing the tension, shifted slightly, some people moving away to give more space, others holding their positions, intrigued by the unfolding scene. Time seemed to slow as the guard weighed his options. His hand rested lightly on the reins, ready to guide his horse if he needed to move quickly. He could feel the horse's energy, the coiled strength beneath him, ready to spring into action if necessary. The young men, unaware of the precise bond between the guard and his horse, continued their teasing and testing, confident that the situation was still under control. Then, in a moment of quiet clarity, the guard made his decision. Words had not been enough to prevent mischief, and the group's boldness had reached a point where action was required. He would need to intervene, but carefully, ensuring that no one was harmed, not the young men, the crowd, or even his own horse. The horse, sensing the guard's resolve, shifted its weight again, muscles rippling beneath its coat, ready to respond with precision. As the sun continued to shine warmly over the gate, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the tension remained in the air. Everyone could feel that something was about to happen. The crowd, the young men, and the guard were all aware, even if only subconsciously, that this quiet afternoon might soon be interrupted by a sudden and unexpected moment of courage. For the first time, the young men realized that the guard was not just an ordinary officer. His calmness was not weakness. His silence was not hesitation. There was a quiet strength in the way he sat on his horse, a readiness in his eyes, a connection with his animal that promised controlled, careful action. It was a subtle, almost invisible warning, but those who were paying attention could sense it. And in that quiet, tense moment, with the sun warming the city gate and the wind whispering through the leaves, the stage was set. Something extraordinary was about to happen, something that would shift the balance between mischief and order, between chaos and calm, in a way that no one watching would soon forget. The quiet at the city gate began to shift. What had seemed like a calm afternoon now carried a subtle, uneasy energy. The young men, who had been lingering at the edge of mischief, were now more daring. Their initial tests of the guard's patience had turned into deliberate attempts to cause a minor disturbance. One of them nudged a wooden cart that belonged to a vendor, causing it to wobble slightly, while another started pushing at the gate with a little more force than before. Their laughter, once quiet and nervous, grew louder, attempting to draw attention and perhaps even provoke a reaction from the people around them. The crowd noticed the change immediately. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter, while merchants froze mid-sale, unsure if the situation would escalate. A few of the onlookers exchanged worried glances. The city gate, which had been a place of routine and order, was beginning to feel like the center of tension, as though the calm had been replaced by a thin line of anticipation. Everyone could feel it, even if no one could say exactly what might happen next. The guard, atop his strong and steady horse, observed everything closely. He did not speak immediately. He had learned long ago that sometimes a calm presence could have a more powerful effect than shouting or rushing in. His eyes moved from one young man to another, noting their body language, the way they nudged objects, the subtle defiance in their posture. He recognized that this was the point where mischief could turn into real trouble if it was not addressed carefully and swiftly. The horse, sensing the growing tension, shifted its weight and let out a soft snort. Its ears twitched forward, alert to every movement. The guard patted its neck lightly, offering reassurance. He had a deep connection with this horse, one built over years of training and shared experiences. He knew that together they could act decisively if necessary. The horse would respond instantly to his commands, but the guard also trusted the horse to sense danger and react with controlled strength. Meanwhile, the young men were growing bolder. One of them reached out and grabbed a small piece of paper from a nearby stall, waving it in the air as if to provoke the guard or the crowd. Another knocked over a crate, letting the contents spill across the cobblestones. The noise caught the attention of everyone nearby. Some people gasped, while others took a cautious step back. The laughter of the young men now had a sharper edge, fueled by the thrill of attention and the energy of testing limits. The guard decided it was time to speak. His voice rang out clearly, calm but firm, carrying across the cobblestones. "Stop this immediately. Leave the gate area and behave properly. This is your final warning." His eyes, steady and unwavering, met each of the young men in turn. He did not shout or raise his hand, but his authority was evident in the way he held himself on the horse, confident and in control. For a moment, the young men froze, startled by the tone of the voice. They had not expected such composure, such absolute calm under pressure. But the pause was brief. One of them muttered under his breath and nudged his friend as if to say, "We can still have some fun. Don't worry." The others laughed quietly, shrugging off the warning. They did not yet realize that the situation was about to change. The crowd's attention was fully on the unfolding scene. People whispered to one another, sharing their concern and curiosity. Some admired the guard's calm demeanor, noting how he remained collected even as the young men became bolder. Others were nervous, worried about what might happen if the situation escalated further. The tension in the air was tangible, like the quiet before a storm. The guard made a small adjustment in the saddle, signaling to the horse that he might need to act. The horse responded instantly, shifting its weight and standing more firmly. Its eyes, dark and intelligent, seemed to communicate understanding with the guard. Together, they formed a silent team, ready to respond if the young men crossed the line. The energy between the two was almost electric, a combination of experience, trust, and readiness. The young men, oblivious to the bond between the guard and his horse, decided to push the limits even further. One of them grabbed a small barrel from a nearby cart and rolled it toward the gate. Another tried to climb onto a low wall, as if to prove he was fearless. Their actions were reckless but not yet dangerous. The guard continued to watch, knowing that patience and timing were essential. A single wrong move could either make the situation worse or resolve it completely. The crowd held its breath. Some people began to move slightly further back, sensing that the situation might escalate. Children were guided closer to their parents, and vendors quietly began to secure their goods. Everyone seemed to understand that the young men were testing boundaries, and that the guard's next action could be critical. The atmosphere, once peaceful, now carried a quiet tension that was impossible to ignore. The guard spoke again, his voice calm but with a clear edge of authority. "I will not ask a second time. Stop immediately or you will face consequences." This time, There was a noticeable firmness in his tone. The young men glanced at each other, sensing for the first time that this might not be a game, but their pride and desire for attention made them hesitate to back down. Suddenly, one of the young men attempted to dash past the guard, aiming to provoke a reaction. The horse shifted slightly, its muscles coiled like a spring, ready to move. The guard's eyes followed the man's every move, calculating, precise. He did not panic. Instead, he prepared to act in a way that would assert control without causing harm. The horse, trained for moments like this, responded instantly to the guard's subtle movements, ready to support him. The small crowd gasped as they realized that action might be imminent. People instinctively moved to the sides, giving space while still watching intently. There was a mixture of fear and anticipation, curiosity and admiration. Everyone could sense that something remarkable was about to happen, something that could turn the tide of this tense afternoon. The young men, now aware that the guard was not someone to be underestimated, hesitated. Their confidence began to waver slightly, but it was clear they were not ready to give up entirely. One of them looked at the horse, a large, powerful animal that seemed calm yet full of energy, and felt a momentary flicker of fear. But he quickly tried to mask it with a smirk, urging his friends to continue their antics. The guard remained steady, his posture unwavering, his gaze sharp. He knew that he could not allow the situation to escalate further. Every second that passed increased the risk that someone could be hurt or that chaos could spread. His mind raced quietly, planning the safest and most effective way to regain control. The horse, sensing the seriousness of the moment, shifted its stance, ready for the slightest command. The tension reached its peak as the young men prepared to take another daring step. One of them raised his hands to throw a small object toward the gate, testing the guard's response once more. The crowd collectively held its breath, sensing that the moment of decision had arrived. The air seemed heavier, charged with anticipation, as if the city itself was waiting to see what would happen next. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The guard, atop his horse, surveyed the scene with calm determination. He had faced many challenges in his years of service, but each situation required a careful balance of authority, skill, and courage. He knew that what he did next would determine not just the immediate outcome, but also how the crowd and the young men would remember this day. The young men's energy, once playful and mischievous, was now met with a quiet, commanding presence that they could not ignore. The subtle power of the guard's composure, combined with the readiness of his horse, created a tension that was almost impossible to describe. The crowd felt it, the young men felt it, and the city gate itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, in that suspended moment, the guard made his decision. He would act decisively, but with care. The next move would determine everything: the safety of the crowd, the lesson for the young men, and the restoration of calm at the gate. The anticipation in the air was palpable. Everyone watching knew that something extraordinary was about to unfold, a moment that would leave a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. The air at the city gate was thick with tension. The young men, emboldened by the crowd's attention, were still testing the limits, their laughter now edged with nervous excitement. They nudged barrels, kicked loose stones, and whispered to each other, their confidence slowly eroding under the watchful gaze of the guard. Each movement they made seemed bolder, as if they were daring the guard to take action. The guard sat tall on his horse, scanning every motion with unflinching eyes. He had been silent for long enough. Words alone had not convinced the young men to stop. The calm warning had passed, replaced now by a quiet tension that hinted at the need for immediate action. The horse beneath him shifted its weight, feeling the energy in the air and the subtle command in the guard's posture. Together they were ready, a single unit of strength and control. The young men, sensing the shift, exchanged nervous glances. Their confidence wavered, but their pride still urged them to continue. One of them kicked a crate, sending it tipping over with a loud clatter. The noise startled nearby people, and a few gasped, moving further back. Children were hurried to the side by their parents, and merchants began securing their goods, recognizing that the situation was escalating. The city gate, once a peaceful place, had become the stage for a silent standoff. The guard raised his hand slightly, a subtle movement that the horse understood perfectly. The animal tensed its muscles, ready to spring into motion at a moment's notice. Its ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring slightly as it sensed the heightened energy of the crowd and the boldness of the young men. The horse was not being aggressive. It was poised and alert, a steady presence that could act with precision when needed. The young men, unaware of the bond between guard and horse, took one more daring step. One of them bent down to grab a small stone from the ground, intending to toss it toward a nearby cart, just to provoke a reaction. Another nudged a wooden barrel toward the gate, testing both the guard's patience and the horse's response. Their laughter was sharper now, tinged with fear and excitement, but they did not yet realize how quickly the situation could change. The guard leaned slightly forward, speaking in a low but firm voice. "Stop! Leave the gate now. I will not warn you again." His eyes, steady and unyielding, met each of theirs in turn. There was no anger, only a calm, unshakable authority that seemed to fill the space around him. The words carried weight, not because of volume but because of the quiet confidence behind them. For a moment, the young men hesitated. They glanced at each other, their earlier bravado faltering. The crowd, sensing that something was about to happen, collectively held its breath. A few people moved closer to the sides, hoping to witness the outcome without being caught in the middle. Every pair of eyes in the area seemed focused entirely on the guard and his horse, waiting for the moment that would decide the afternoon. Then, without further warning, the guard made his move. He nudged the horse with his leg, a light but decisive signal that sent the animal into motion. The horse stepped forward smoothly, its hooves clicking against the cobblestones in a controlled, steady rhythm. The sudden movement caught the young men completely off guard. Their laughter died in their throats, replaced by wide-eyed surprise as the horse approached them. The horse did not charge recklessly. It moved with purpose, precision, and calm authority. The young men instinctively stepped back, realizing that the horse was not an ordinary animal. It was responding to a command, acting with intelligence and discipline. The guard guided the horse with subtle movements, ensuring that the approach was enough to create distance without causing harm. The sheer size and presence of the animal were enough to command attention and respect. One of the young men stumbled slightly as he tried to move out of the way. The horse stopped just short, careful and controlled, its dark eyes observing each movement. The crowd gasped, some clapping quietly in admiration, others holding their hands to their mouths in astonishment. This was not an aggressive display. It was a demonstration of authority, strength, and control. The young men, now realizing that the guard and his horse were a united force, began to retreat, slowly and cautiously. The guard did not let the moment slip. He guided the horse forward again, maintaining just enough pressure to encourage the young men to continue moving away from the gate. The animal's hooves clicked against the stones, a steady, commanding rhythm that echoed through the area. It was clear to everyone watching that the situation was under control, but also that any further mischief would be met with the same swift precision. The young men glanced at each other, panic mixing with humiliation. Their playful defiance had been met with quiet authority, a response they had not anticipated. One of them attempted to make a sudden dash to escape, but the horse shifted slightly, blocking the path without making contact. The guard's presence, calm yet decisive, ensured that they understood the boundaries clearly. The crowd began to breathe more freely as the tension eased. Whispers of admiration spread quietly among the onlookers. Many commented on the skill of the guard and the intelligence of his horse. Children, who had been hiding behind their parents, peeked curiously, eyes wide with awe. Merchants returned to securing their stalls fully, some smiling quietly at the display of control and courage. The guard kept the horse steady, allowing the young men to retreat fully from the gate area. He did not pursue them aggressively. There was no need. The lesson had been learned through presence and precision, not through violence. The crowd watched as the guard guided the horse calmly back to a neutral position, signaling the end of the confrontation. The tension in the air slowly dissipated, replaced by a quiet sense of respect and relief. The young men stopped a short distance away, realizing that their actions had consequences. They looked at each other, silently acknowledging that the afternoon had taken a turn they had not expected. The guard, still calm atop his horse, observed them with a steady gaze. There was no gloating, no anger, only a quiet assertion of authority that left a lasting impression. The crowd began to return to its normal rhythm, conversations resuming, laughter returning to the children, and merchants attending to their customers. Yet there was a lingering sense of awe. People spoke quietly among themselves about the courage of the guard and the skill of the horse. Some whispered that they had never seen such a display of controlled authority, a moment where power and precision worked together without causing harm. The guard remained vigilant, not out of fear but out of responsibility. He understood that even as the immediate danger had passed, his role was to ensure ongoing safety. The horse, sensing the relaxation of tension, shifted its weight and let out a soft snort, relaxing slightly but remaining alert. The bond between the guard and the horse was evident to anyone paying attention, a connection built on trust, training, and years of experience. As the young men walked away, their heads low and expressions subdued, the lesson of the afternoon was clear. Authority need not be loud or aggressive to be respected. Calm, deliberate action, supported by skill and preparation, could achieve what shouting and chaos never could. The crowd had witnessed not just a moment of control, but a demonstration of courage, intelligence, and discipline in action. The afternoon sun continued to shine over the city gate, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The gentle breeze returned, rustling the leaves of nearby trees and carrying the faint sound of distant bells. Life slowly returned to normal, but the memory of what had just happened lingered in the minds of everyone present. Children talked quietly about the brave guard and his horse, and adults nodded to one another, silently appreciating the skill and bravery displayed. The guard allowed the horse to take a few slow steps back, signaling the end of the immediate threat. He did not dismount yet, remaining watchful, knowing that his role required ongoing vigilance. The young men, now at a safe distance, seemed to understand the weight of their actions. They whispered among themselves, perhaps realizing that mischief had consequences, and that courage, calmness, and preparedness could overcome boldness and recklessness. The crowd began to disperse gradually, some lingering to watch the horse and its rider for a few more moments, admiring the calm authority that had restored order without harm. The city gate, once again peaceful, now carried the subtle hum of life returning to normal. People resumed their daily routines, but the story of the guard's action would be remembered and retold, a tale of courage and controlled strength that left an impression far beyond the cobblestones of the gate. Even as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long, soft shadows, the guard and his horse remained vigilant. They were a reminder that calm authority, skillful action, and the bond between human and animal could maintain order and respect, even in the face of unexpected challenges. The young men had learned their lesson, the crowd had witnessed courage, and the city gate once again became a place of safety and peace, at least for now. After the guard's decisive action, the city gate slowly returned to a state of calm. The young men, who had been bold and reckless just moments before, were now subdued, their faces showing a mixture of embarrassment and respect. They stood a short distance away, whispering among themselves, unsure what to do next. For the first time, they seemed to understand that mischief had limits and that authority, when exercised with calm precision, could command obedience without shouting or physical aggression. The crowd that had gathered at the gate was equally affected. People leaned closer together, sharing quiet conversations about what they had just witnessed. Mothers held their children slightly tighter, some still in awe of the guard's skill and courage. Merchants who had been worried about their goods began arranging their stalls again, murmuring to one another about the unexpected drama. It was a moment that would be remembered for days, perhaps weeks, as a rare display of control and bravery in their everyday lives. The guard remained seated on his horse, watching the young men carefully. He knew that while the immediate threat had passed, the situation was not fully resolved. There could be consequences to their actions, lessons that needed to be reinforced to prevent further trouble. His posture was calm yet commanding, an unspoken reminder to everyone that vigilance was ongoing. The horse beneath him shifted slightly, muscles coiling and releasing with controlled ease, mirroring the guard's readiness. Slowly, the young men began to step back further, moving away from the gate and from the crowd. One of them muttered something quietly, likely an apology or a comment about the guard's unexpected skill. Another seemed to glance back at the horse, still impressed by its size and intelligence. Their energy had shifted from playful defiance to cautious respect, an internal acknowledgement that they had been confronted by someone prepared, capable, and calm in the face of challenge. The crowd, noticing the change, started to relax. Conversations resumed, quieter at first, but steadily gaining momentum as people processed what had just happened. Children peeked from behind their parents, whispering about the brave guard and his big horse, as though recounting a story from a favorite book. Adults nodded to one another, sharing expressions of admiration and relief. The atmosphere had transformed from tension to relief and appreciation, a shift that highlighted the impact of the guard's measured approach. As the young men retreated further, the guard gently guided his horse a few steps to the side. It was a subtle motion, signaling that the immediate confrontation was over, yet he remained vigilant. The horse snorted softly, relaxing slightly but staying alert to the sounds and movements around the gate. The bond between guard and horse was evident, a seamless communication that conveyed authority and control without aggression. Anyone observing closely could see that the moment had been handled with skill and intelligence. A few merchants, having regained their composure, approached the guard cautiously. "Thank you," one said, a note of genuine gratitude in his voice. "We were worried for a moment, but your presence stopped things before they got out of hand." Another added, "You and your horse handled that so calmly. It's impressive to see someone act with such precision and control." The guard nodded quietly, acknowledging their words with humility. He did not boast, understanding that the display of authority was its own reward. Meanwhile, the young men, now fully aware of the consequences of their actions, began to disperse. Their whispers carried a mixture of disbelief and reflection. One muttered to another, "I didn't think he would act like that," and the horse, it was like it understood everything. Another, more thoughtful, added, "We should have listened when he warned us." I guess we learned the hard way. There was no visible anger or resentment, only the quiet realization that respect and caution were essential in the presence of authority. The crowd, witnessing the retreat and subdued behavior of the young men, began to applaud softly. The sound was not loud or disruptive, but it carried a sense of collective admiration. People clapped for the guard and his horse, not just for their strength, but for the careful, controlled way in which the situation had been resolved. It was a rare moment of public recognition for skill, courage, and calm judgment, and it resonated deeply with everyone present. The guard allowed the horse to take a few slow steps forward, a subtle shift that encouraged the young men to leave the area entirely. The animal moved with measured grace, showing both strength and restraint. Its dark, intelligent eyes scanned the crowd, sensing the lingering energy from the confrontation and ensuring that all remained calm. The young men, now at a safe distance, glanced back once more, acknowledging the quiet authority they had just encountered. Parents guided their children closer to them, some whispering about how impressive the guard had been. "He didn't shout, didn't hurt anyone, but he made them leave," one mother said quietly. Another added, "It's amazing how calm and controlled he was, even when they were being so bold." The atmosphere was filled with a sense of wonder and respect, as if the city gate itself had been transformed by the events of the afternoon. The guard's posture remained steady as he continued to observe the area. He knew that while the immediate danger had passed, his responsibility was ongoing. The crowd's safety, the young men's understanding of consequences, and the preservation of order were all part of his duty. He allowed the horse to stand still for a moment, patting its neck gently. The animal snorted softly in response, a sign of trust and understanding between them. Gradually, the crowd began to disperse, returning to their daily routines with a newfound sense of respect for the guard. Merchants resumed their sales, children returned to playing in safer areas, and neighbors continued conversations about the event they had just witnessed. Yet the memory of the guard's calm authority and the horse's controlled strength lingered in their minds. It was a story they would recount, a lesson in courage, patience, and measured action that would stay with them long after the afternoon had passed. Even the young men, though embarrassed, carried a quiet sense of respect. They had learned an important lesson. Boldness without understanding could lead to consequences, and true authority did not need to be loud or aggressive. Their energy shifted from recklessness to reflection, a subtle but meaningful transformation. One of them whispered to his friend, "I don't think I'll ever mess around at the gate again." The friend nodded silently, the weight of the lesson sinking in. The guard finally allowed himself to relax slightly, though he remained alert. His job was not finished until he was confident that the area was safe and that no further mischief would occur. The horse, sensing the change in pace, relaxed its stance as well, standing tall but at ease. Together, they had restored order without harm, demonstrating that patience, skill, and precise action could resolve even tense situations. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, the city gate returned to its normal rhythm. People moved about, returning to their routines, but the afternoon's events had left a lasting impression. The guard and his horse had shown that courage and control, when combined with wisdom and patience, could maintain peace in the face of challenge. It was a moment that would be remembered not just for the action, but for the manner in which it had been handled. Conversations among the crowd reflected this sentiment. "I've never seen anyone act so calmly under pressure," one merchant said. "He didn't even raise his voice, yet everything was under control." Another replied, "It's the horse too." It was like it understood exactly what needed to happen. Children nodded, eyes wide with admiration, imagining themselves as brave guards protecting their city. The young men finally left the area entirely, walking with heads slightly lowered, a quiet lesson etched into their minds. They no longer spoke loudly or acted recklessly. The lesson of the afternoon was clear. Respect, caution, and awareness of consequences were essential, especially when authority was present. The guard had taught them this without a harsh word or aggressive action, relying instead on skill, calmness, and the remarkable presence of his horse. The crowd gradually thinned, leaving the gate peaceful once more. The guard remained seated, vigilant, and composed, aware that his role required constant readiness. The horse shifted its weight again, calm and alert, a symbol of discipline and trust. The events of the afternoon had demonstrated a rare combination of courage, intelligence, and restraint, leaving an impression that would be told and retold in the city for a long time. As the evening approached, the warmth of the sun softened, and the streets around the city gate quieted. The guard finally allowed himself a small sigh of relief, knowing that he had restored order without causing harm. The young men had learned a valuable lesson. The crowd had witnessed bravery and skill, and the city gate was once again a place of calm and routine. Yet the memory of the afternoon would linger, a story of courage, patience, and controlled action that exemplified the best of human and animal partnership. The sun was beginning to set over the city gate, casting a warm golden glow across the cobblestones. The afternoon's events had left a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed them. The quiet that now settled over the area was different from the morning calm. It carried a sense of respect and reflection, as if the city itself had absorbed the lesson taught by the guard and his horse. People who had gathered earlier were slowly leaving, talking quietly to one another, their voices filled with admiration and wonder. The guard remained seated atop his horse, keeping a vigilant eye on the gate and the nearby streets. He understood that his job did not end simply because the immediate situation had been resolved. His role was to maintain safety, to ensure that order was preserved, and to act as a reminder that calm authority could achieve what force and shouting could not. The horse beneath him shifted slightly, a soft snort of acknowledgement escaping its nostrils. The animal had been steady, strong, and responsive throughout the confrontation, a true partner in restoring peace. Merchants returned to their stalls, carefully rearranging their goods. Many of them spoke quietly among themselves about what had happened. "I've never seen someone handle a situation so perfectly," one merchant said, adjusting the crates of vegetables in front of his stall. Not a single shout, not a single harsh move. And yet the young men understood immediately. Another merchant nodded, adding, "It's incredible how the horse responded too. I've seen animals trained, but never like this." It seemed to know exactly what the guard wanted. Their conversation reflected a shared sense of appreciation, a recognition that the events of the afternoon had been extraordinary. Children, still wide-eyed from witnessing the scene, clung to their parents or whispered excitedly to one another. "The guard was so brave," one child exclaimed. "And the horse, it was amazing." Another nodded enthusiastically. "I want to be like them when I grow up." Their voices, filled with wonder and admiration, echoed softly through the streets, a reminder that courage and calmness could inspire the next generation. Even the young men who had caused the commotion earlier were now at a safe distance, reflecting on their actions. They spoke quietly among themselves, no longer daring to make jokes or provoke attention. One said, "I can't believe how calm he stayed, and the horse. It was incredible." Another added, "We really learned something today. I don't think we'll ever act like that again." Their voices were tinged with humility, a recognition that their earlier boldness had been met with skillful authority and restraint. The guard finally allowed his horse to take a few slow steps, walking along the gate as he continued to observe the area. His calm presence reminded everyone nearby that vigilance and responsibility were ongoing, not limited to a single event. The horse responded with perfect understanding, moving with measured grace, its muscles rippling under the sunlight. Together, they embodied a balance of strength and control, a partnership built on trust, experience, and mutual respect. As the crowd continued to disperse, neighbors and passers-by paused to offer words of thanks or admiration. "Thank you for keeping us safe," one elder said, bowing slightly. "Your calmness and skill prevented anyone from getting hurt." Another added, "You've shown everyone that courage doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes, quiet action is the strongest." The guard nodded in acknowledgement, his expression calm but satisfied. He did not boast. He understood that the true measure of his work was in the safety and respect of the people he served. The young men, now reflecting more deeply on the day's events, walked together in silence for a few moments. One finally spoke, "I think we've learned the importance of respect today. Boldness can only go so far, and it's clear that authority, when exercised properly, can command respect without harm." Another nodded, adding, "And it's not just about strength. Calmness, patience, and careful action are even more important." Their words were genuine, showing that the lesson had sunk in far beyond mere fear or embarrassment. Meanwhile, merchants began closing their stalls as the evening approached. The soft glow of lanterns illuminated the streets, casting gentle shadows across the cobblestones. People moved quietly, carrying the memory of the day's events with them. Conversations continued about the guards' bravery, the horses' intelligence, and the way the situation had been resolved with calm authority. It was clear that the afternoon had left an impression that would not fade quickly. The guard, still atop his horse, continued his patrol along the gate. His presence was reassuring to everyone who remained nearby. He walked slowly, observing the area, ensuring that no further trouble arose. The horse matched his pace perfectly, a silent but powerful companion. Their coordination was seamless, a result of years of training, shared experience, and deep trust. Anyone watching closely could see the bond, understanding that the guard's strength came not just from himself, but also from the remarkable partnership with his horse. As darkness began to settle over the city, the guard finally allowed the horse to stand still. He patted its neck gently, a quiet gesture of appreciation for its steady presence. The horse responded with a soft nuzzle, a simple but meaningful acknowledgement of their teamwork. Together, they had faced challenge and conflict, and together they had restored peace, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had witnessed their actions. People passing by continued to glance at the guard and his horse, their expressions a mix of admiration and gratitude. Conversations echoed softly in the streets, recounting the events with awe. "It was incredible," one passerby said. "He didn't even raise his voice, and yet he controlled the situation perfectly." Another replied, "It's a lesson in patience, skill, and respect. Everyone should see how it was handled." The story spread quickly, becoming a part of the city's shared memory, a reminder of what courage and calmness could achieve. Even after the crowd had mostly dispersed, the young men lingered for a few moments, still reflecting on the lessons of the afternoon. "We need to remember this," one said quietly. "Not just what happened, but how it happened. Calm action, respect, and understanding can solve problems better than reckless behavior ever could." The others nodded in agreement, a newfound maturity evident in their expressions. The lesson had gone beyond immediate consequences. It had touched their understanding of responsibility, authority, and courage. The guard finally dismounted as the evening grew darker. He walked alongside the horse for a few moments, checking the area one last time. His steps were steady and deliberate, his posture relaxed but vigilant. The horse followed obediently, calm and attentive, reflecting the trust and discipline that had guided them throughout the day. Together, they had not only restored order, but also inspired those who had witnessed their actions. As they prepared to leave the city gate, the guard looked around at the streets, the merchants closing their stalls, the families returning home, and the lingering whispers of admiration in the air. He understood that his role went beyond enforcing rules. It was about teaching respect, inspiring courage, and demonstrating that true authority could be exercised with patience and precision. The horse nuzzled his hand gently, a quiet companion who had played an essential role in the day's events. The young men, now walking away from the gate with heads held lower than before, carried the lesson with them. Their energy, once reckless and bold, had transformed into reflection and understanding. They understood the value of calm authority, the importance of respecting others, and the power of courage exercised with wisdom. The memory of the guard and his horse would remain with them, a guide for future choices and behavior. The city gate, now quiet and peaceful, seemed to hum with the lessons of the afternoon. The sun set completely, casting long shadows across the cobblestones, while the faint glow of lanterns added a gentle warmth to the streets. The events of the day had left an enduring mark on the people, a story of bravery, control, and partnership that would be remembered and retold for years to come. As the guard and his horse finally moved away from the gate, their silhouettes framed by the soft evening light, it was clear that the lessons of the day were complete. Courage, calmness, and careful action had restored order. Respect had been earned, lessons had been learned, and the city had been reminded of the quiet power of authority exercised with patience and skill. The story of the guard and his horse would remain in the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed it, a timeless example of bravery and wisdom. Even as the night fell and the streets emptied, the memory of the guard's action lingered. Conversations would continue, children would recount the story to their friends, and merchants would recall the day to those passing through the city. It was a story that went beyond a single incident. It became a lesson in courage, respect, and the extraordinary bond between a human and an animal working together to maintain peace.